Hello, my name is Mr. Atherall, and exams are fast approaching, and you're going to have to write some stuff about Macbeth. So I'm going to do a few videos which just whiz through the entire play of Macbeth, just summarising bits and picking out key quotes that are things worth remembering, and make comments on how we might analyse the language in terms of those quotes and why those quotes are important. So I'm going to whiz through. So, Act 1, Scene 1. So the first scene is with the witches, and the witches are getting ready to meet Macbeth. Now, witchcraft is an important thing just to consider contextually. If you talk about the witches, we want to talk about how people in the Jacobean era felt about witchcraft. So they would have a strong faith in the power of witches. When the witches first appear, there's a storm brewing, which would have been something that the Jacobean audience would have linked with witchcraft. Many would have believed that witches could control the weather and create those storms. They would have believed that witches were agents of Satan, so they would have been believing that they were literally doing Satan's work on earth. And at about the same time that Macbeth was appearing on the stage was the same time that being a witch became a capital offence. The king on the throne at that time, a guy called James I, he was paranoid about witchcraft and wrote a book called Demonology about witchcraft. So lots of stuff going on contextually about witches. In terms of that scene, the witches are just getting ready to meet Macbeth. They're planning to meet Macbeth. And the most interesting quote that is worth remembering just from that first scene is that phrase, "Fair is foul and foul is fair." It introduces us straight away to these two contrasting ideas: something fair, something beautiful, something admirable, and something foul. This is essentially what Macbeth is becoming. This is a statement that foreshadows what's come. Someone who's fair, someone who fights bravely and honours his king, is going to become a murderer. And this statement is what we call a paradox, something that can't be true, something can't be both fair and foul at the same time, and is a line that is repeated by other characters at different points in the play as well, as we will find as we motor through. So that statement is a particularly important one, and the idea of witchcraft is important in the opening scene. Okay, we then jump into Act 1, Scene 2, and we've got Duncan and Malcolm on the edge of battle, and they are just about to receive some news about what has happened at the battle. And this is where we first hear of Macbeth. And so the captain returns from the battle, and he tells us, "Brave Macbeth unseems the merciless Macdonald." So, our first impression of Macbeth at the beginning is he's a brave, courageous fighter, someone who killed the enemy, who fought for his country, was brave, put his life on the line. That is who Macbeth is at the beginning of the play. So if we're going to be talking about Macbeth and his journey, just that adjective brave, that's what the captain uses to describe him. Now, other news that comes from the battle is that there's been some disloyalty. Again, disloyalty is going to be a theme. Macbeth obviously becomes very disloyal during the course of the play. And the person who's disloyal is the person who is, at this point, the Thane of Cawdor. He's described as a disloyal traitor. And because of his disloyalty, he ends up being killed for that. And he's no longer the Thane of Cawdor, and that is what Macbeth becomes. The fact that the Thane of Cawdor is a disloyal traitor, again, is giving us this foreshadowing idea that the next Thane of Cawdor is also going to be a disloyal traitor who goes against the king. So, when the Thane of Cawdor is taken from the thaneship is taken from the Thane of Cawdor, Duncan decides, right, this brave Macbeth, he's going to be the person that is going to be the Thane of Cawdor from now on. Macbeth doesn't know this, but we know it as an audience, which is important for what happens next. So the next thing that happens is the next scene is Act 1, Scene 3, and this is Macbeth meeting the witches. And Macbeth receives some prophecies, and Banquo also receives some prophecies. The prophecies that Macbeth receives are that he's going to be Thane of Glamis. Well, he already is. Thane of Cawdor, well, there's some dramatic irony there because we know that that's about to happen, but Macbeth doesn't know that's about to happen, and he's going to become king hereafter. There's also some prophecies made about Banquo, lesser than Macbeth and greater, not so happy yet much happier. Thou shalt get kings, though thou be none. So the central idea in that is that Banquo's son, will become king. So that's prophesied, and that is also important as the play progresses. Now, Banquo and Macbeth's reactions are very different to the witches, and that's important because they are real contrasting characters in terms of their personalities and their responses, and that is potentially a really important thing to consider, that Banquo is loyal and thoughtful and sees through manipulation, whereas Macbeth is persuadable and quickly becomes disloyal. So a few things they say in this scene are things worth remembering. So Banquo, have we eaten on the insane root? He is concerned. He thinks they have become mad. He is nervous of the influence that these witches are going to have. Then Ross and Angus turn up and tell him, "You're now the Thane of Cawdor." And Macbeth, in an aside, says, "What can the devil speak true?" So remember that idea of witches being agents of Satan. He's thinking that the devil has said something that's true, which is confusing him in his mind, in the sense that he would link the devil with evil, yet it seems that the devil has pronounced something that is a positive thing for him, that he's been rewarded for his bravery and his courage. And so he's asking this rhetorical question, can the devil speak true? And he's being drawn in at this point. He's being attracted by these prophecies. Banquo, much more suspicious. Very, very different personality. He says, "'Tis strange, and oftentimes to win us to our harm, the instruments of darkness of the witches, tell us truths. So evil beings tell us things that are true." And then the next phrase is the bit that I'd really remember: "Win us with honest trifles to betray us in deepest consequence." So they win us with honesty, they persuade us with honest ideas, but those honest ideas are actually ways in which we are manipulated to then do betraying acts which have deep consequences. Again, this foreboding, this sense of danger lying in the future. Banquo gets it. He gets that these witches are manipulating them into doing something bad, and he is already suspicious that these prophecies are gonna go wrong. Macbeth, he's in a right old state at this point. Says lots and lots of different things. Big long soliloquy that he delivers here. He is unstable, I think would be the word I'd use to describe him. He's unstable in his mind. "The horrid image doth unfix my hair." The horrid image is the idea now of killing the king. Immediately that idea of, if I'm going to become the king, then maybe I need to kill the king. And he's literally feeling like he's going to pull his own hair out. He describes murder is yet fantastical. So it's just a fantasy in my mind, but he's fantasizing. Suddenly, the idea of being king, the ambition that is within him, has suddenly driven him to a point where he is willing to kill for it. But he's not at the point where he's definitely going to kill for it. He ends his soliloquy saying, "Chance may crown me without my stir." So he's thinking, maybe I'll just leave it and see what happens. And perhaps I'll become king anyway and leave it to whatever happens. Okay, lots of interesting quotes in Act 1, Scene 3. One I'd really recommend just going and reading through again. Loads of brilliant quotes, lots to zoom in on and discuss. So, Act 1, Scene 4, the Thane of Cawdor, we find out that he has been executed, and Macbeth turns up to see King Duncan, and this is the two-faced Macbeth. He says, "The service and loyalty I owe." He talks about, "I owe you this service." But then just after it, in a little aside, he says, "Stars, hide your fires, let not light, honesty, positivity, see my black and deep desires." So light is personified as something that might see him. Goodness is personified as something that might see his evil desires. Really interesting bit of personification there. Okay, that is the first act.